Hey guys, welcome to Neighbor Stories with JusRead. Today we're diving into some incredible stories about overcoming the toughest neighbor disputes, homeowner association dramas, and dealing with entitled people. Our story is titled, Turning a $1 Million Lawsuit Against an Homeowner Association into a Community Victory. The story starts like this. I never thought I'd be the one to take on our neighborhood's homeowners association, let alone win $1 million lawsuit against them. But life has a funny way of pushing you into situations you never expected. My name's Mike, and this is the story of how our community came together to fight back against injustice and turned a legal battle into a neighborhood renaissance. It all started on a sunny Saturday morning in May. I was out in my front yard, tending to my prized rose bushes, when I noticed my neighbor, Sarah, stomping down the sidewalk with a piece of paper clutched in her hand. Her face was red, and she looked ready to explode. "Mike," she called out as she approached, "did you get one of these?" She thrust the paper at me, and I wiped my hands on my jeans before taking it. It was a notice from our homeowner association, announcing a new set of rules and fees effective immediately. As I scanned the document, my eyebrows shot up. $300 a month increase in dues? I exclaimed. And what's this about mandatory exterior paint colors? Sarah nodded vigorously. It's ridiculous. They can't just spring this on us without any warning or vote. And look at the bottom, they're threatening fines for non-compliance within 30 days. I shook my head in disbelief. Our homeowner association had always been a bit overzealous, but this was a whole new level of overreach. As I looked up and down our street, I could see other neighbors emerging from their homes, all clutching similar notices and wearing expressions of shock and anger. That evening, an impromptu meeting formed in our cul-de-sac. About 20 of us gathered, sharing our outrage and confusion over the new rules. Tom, a retired lawyer who lived at the end of the street, was particularly vocal. "This is blatantly illegal," he declared, waving the notice in the air. "They can't make these kinds of sweeping changes without a proper voting process, and some of these new rules violate our state's homeowner protection laws." As the discussion continued, it became clear that everyone was fed up with the homeowner association's heavy-handed tactics. For years, they'd been gradually tightening their grip on our neighborhood, issuing petty fines and making life difficult for anyone who dared to question their authority. "We need to do something," I found myself saying. "We can't just roll over and accept this." To my surprise, several people nodded in agreement. Sarah stepped forward and said, "Mike's right. We need to fight back. But how?" Tom cleared his throat. "Well, as a former attorney, I can tell you that we have grounds for a lawsuit. These new rules and fees are clearly in violation of our homeowner association's own bylaws, not to mention state law. If we band together, we could take them to court." A murmur of excitement rippled through the group. The idea of finally standing up to the homeowner association was appealing, but also daunting. Legal battles are never easy or cheap. "I'm in," I said, surprising myself with my own determination. If we all chip in, we could hire a good lawyer and really give them a fight. Over the next few days, word spread throughout our neighborhood of 200 homes. We organized a formal meeting at the community center, and to our amazement, nearly every household sent a representative. The energy in the room was electric, a mix of anger, hope, and solidarity. We voted to form a committee to lead the legal battle, with Tom as our advisor. I found myself nominated to be the committee chair, a role I accepted with a mix of pride and trepidation. Sarah volunteered to be our treasurer, and we quickly set up a legal fund for everyone to contribute to. Our first step was to hire a law firm specializing in homeowner association disputes. We found a reputable firm in the city, led by a fierce litigator named Amanda Chen. When we presented our case to her, her eyes lit up. "This is one of the most egregious examples of homeowner association overreach I've seen in years," she told us during our first meeting. "Not only are their actions illegal, but I believe we can make a case for punitive damages due to their history of abusive practices." With Amanda's guidance, we filed a lawsuit against the Homeowner Association Board, challenging the new rules and fees, and seeking damages for years of unfair treatment. The Homeowner Association, predictably, didn't take this lying down. They hired their own high-powered legal team and vowed to fight us every step of the way. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers, depositions, and strategy sessions. Our committee worked tirelessly, gathering evidence of the homeowner association's past misdeeds and rallying support from the community. We set up a website to keep everyone informed, and organized fundraisers to keep our legal fund healthy. As the case progressed, we uncovered some shocking revelations. It turned out that several members of the Homeowner Association Board had been using their positions for personal gain. They had been awarding contracts to friends and family members at inflated prices and pocketing the difference. The new fees they were trying to impose were partly to cover their embezzlement. When this information came to light, it caused an uproar in the community. Even those who had been on the fence about our lawsuit were now fully on board. The local media picked up the story, and suddenly our little neighborhood dispute was making headlines. The Homeowner Association Board, realizing they were in hot water, tried to backpedal. They offered to rescind the new rules and fees if we dropped the lawsuit. But we were past the point of compromise. We wanted justice, not just for the recent incident, but for years of abusive practices. As the trial date approached, tensions in the neighborhood reached a fever pitch. The homeowner association board members became increasingly hostile, issuing threats and trying to intimidate those involved in the lawsuit. But their tactics only strengthened our resolve. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we had our day in court. The trial lasted for 2 grueling weeks, with both sides presenting their cases. Amanda was a force of nature in the courtroom, methodically dismantling the homeowner association's defense and exposing their years of corruption. I'll never forget the moment when the jury foreman stood to deliver the verdict. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. When he announced that they had found in our favor, awarding us $1 million in damages, the room erupted in cheers. It was a total victory. Not only had we won the lawsuit, but the judge also ordered the dissolution of the current homeowner association board and mandated new elections under court supervision. We had done it. We had taken on the homeowner association and won. But our journey wasn't over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. In the days following the verdict, our committee met to discuss what to do with the settlement money. We could have simply divided it among the households in the neighborhood, but that didn't feel right. We had fought this battle not just for ourselves, but for the good of our entire community. What if, I suggested during one of our meetings, we used this money to make our neighborhood better, to do all the things the homeowner association should have been doing all along? The idea caught fire. We put it to a vote among all the residents, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. People were excited about the possibility of real, positive change in our community. We formed a new committee to oversee the use of the funds, making sure to include a diverse range of voices from throughout the neighborhood. Over the next few months, we held town hall meetings, conducted surveys, and gathered ideas from everyone about how best to use the money. The first project we tackled was the community park. For years, it had been neglected, with broken playground equipment and overgrown landscaping. We used a portion of the funds to completely renovate it, installing new play structures, creating a beautiful garden area, and even adding a small amphitheater for community events. Next, we turned our attention to infrastructure. We repaved roads that had been full of potholes, upgraded the neighborhood's outdated storm drainage system, and installed energy-efficient streetlights that reduced light pollution while improving safety. But we didn't stop at physical improvements. We also invested in our community's social fabric. We established a scholarship fund for local students, created a neighborhood watch program, and started an annual festival to celebrate our community's diversity and strengthen bonds between neighbors. One of our most popular initiatives was the Neighbor Help Network. We set up a system where residents could volunteer their skills or request help from others. Whether it was assistance with yard work for elderly residents, carpooling for working parents, or tutoring for students, the network fostered a spirit of mutual support and cooperation that had been sorely lacking under the old homeowner association regime. As these projects took shape, I noticed a remarkable change in our neighborhood. People who had once hurried from their cars to their homes with barely a nod to their neighbors were now stopping to chat, organize block parties, and participate in community events. The atmosphere of suspicion and resentment that had prevailed under the old homeowner association was replaced by a sense of pride and camaraderie. One day, about 6 months after the lawsuit, I was walking through the newly renovated park when I ran into Sarah. She was pushing her daughter on the swings, a big smile on her face. "Can you believe how much has changed?" she said, gesturing around the park. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually glad the homeowner association pushed us too far. Look at what we've accomplished." I nodded, feeling a swell of pride. "It's pretty amazing, but we couldn't have done it without everyone coming together." As we chatted, more neighbors arrived at the park. Tom, our retired lawyer friend, was there with his grandkids. Maria, a young software engineer who had recently moved to the neighborhood, was walking her dog. Even Mr. Johnson, a grumpy old fellow who used to complain about everything, was there, tending to the community garden we'd established in one corner of the park. "You know," Tom said, joining our conversation, "I've been thinking about how we can make sure this positive change lasts. We need to set up a new homeowner association structure that serves the community instead of ruling over it." His words struck a chord with me. We had won the battle against the old homeowner association, but we needed to ensure we didn't fall back into the same patterns. Over the next few weeks, we held a series of meetings to discuss the future governance of our neighborhood. Everyone agreed that we needed some form of organization to manage common areas and maintain our new initiatives, but we were determined to create a system that was transparent, fair, and truly representative of the community's interests. After much debate and several drafts, we came up with a new charter for a neighborhood association to replace the old homeowner association. The key differences were: term limits for board members to prevent entrenchment of power, regular town hall meetings where all residents could voice concerns and propose ideas, a requirement for major decisions to be put to a community-wide vote, strict conflict of interest rules to prevent board members from profiting from their positions, a focus on community building and support rather than rule enforcement. When we presented the new charter to the neighborhood, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People were excited about the prospect of a governing body that would work for them, not against them. The election for the new Neighborhood Association Board was a far cry from the apathetic affairs of the past. We had multiple candidates for each position, and nearly every household participated in the voting. I was honored to be elected as the first president of the new association, with Sarah as vice president, and a diverse group of neighbors filling the other roles. As we settled into our new roles, we faced our first major challenge. The city announced plans to build a large commercial development on the edge of our neighborhood. The project would bring increased traffic and potentially lower property values. In the past, the old homeowner association would have either ignored the issue or made unilateral decisions without consulting residents. But we took a different approach. We organized community meetings, invited city planners to present their proposals, and facilitated discussions about the pros and cons of the development. After gathering input from everyone, we decided as a community to negotiate with the city. We proposed a compromise. We would support a scaled-down version of the development in exchange for funds to create a buffer zone of parkland between the commercial area and our homes. To our surprise, the city was receptive to our proposal. They appreciated our organized and constructive approach, and over several months of negotiations, we hammered out a deal that benefited both sides. The resulting development brought new amenities to our area without disrupting our neighborhood's character, and the new park became another gathering place for our community. This success boosted confidence in our new governance model. People saw that by working together, we could shape the future of our neighborhood in positive ways. As the months turned into years, our community continued to thrive. The money from the lawsuit had long since been spent, but the spirit of cooperation and engagement it had fostered lived on. We started community education programs, bringing in experts to teach classes on everything from gardening to financial literacy. We organized volunteer days to help elderly neighbors with home repairs and yard work. We even started a small community-supported agriculture program, turning a vacant lot into a productive garden that supplied fresh produce to local families. Of course, it wasn't always smooth sailing. We had our share of disagreements and challenges, but the difference was in how we handled them. Instead of imposing top-down solutions, we focused on open communication and collaborative problem-solving. For example, when a group of residents wanted to start a community composting program, some neighbors were concerned about potential odors and pests. Instead of simply approving or denying the proposal, we organized a series of workshops where proponents could demonstrate proper composting techniques and address concerns. In the end, we found a compromise that allowed for a small-scale pilot program, which eventually grew into a successful neighborhood-wide initiative. 5 years after the lawsuit, our neighborhood had become a model for others in the region. We regularly hosted visitors from other communities who wanted to learn about our governance model and community building strategies. One crisp autumn day, as I was raking leaves in my front yard, a car pulled up and a woman I didn't recognize stepped out. She introduced herself as Lisa, the president of an homeowner association from a nearby town. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced," she said, looking a bit sheepish. "But I've heard so much about what you've accomplished here, and I had to see it for myself. Our homeowner association is having a lot of problems, and I'm hoping to learn from your experience." I invited Lisa in for a cup of coffee, and as we sat on my porch, I shared our story. I told her about the lawsuit, the community projects, and the new governance model we had developed. As I spoke, I could see the hope growing in her eyes. "It sounds almost too good to be true," she said when I finished. "Do you really think we could do something similar in our neighborhood?" I smiled, remembering how daunting it had all seemed at the beginning. "It won't be easy," I told her honestly. "It takes a lot of work and commitment from everyone. But if we could do it, I believe any community can. The key is to focus on bringing people together, not driving them apart." As Lisa left, promising to stay in touch, I looked out over our neighborhood. Kids were playing in the park, neighbors were chatting on street corners, and volunteers were tending to the community garden. It wasn't perfect, no place is, but it was a far cry from the divided, resentful community we had been just a few years ago. I thought back to that day when Sarah had stormed up to me with the homeowner association notice, sparking the chain of events that led to where we were now. At the time, it had seemed like a disaster, but it turned out to be the catalyst for positive change that our community desperately needed. That evening, at our monthly neighborhood association meeting, I looked around the room at the faces of my neighbors, friends really, after all we'd been through together. As we discussed plans for our annual community festival, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. We had turned a $1 million lawsuit into something far more valuable, a strong, united community where people looked out for each other and worked together to make their shared home a better place. And that, I realized, was the real victory, one that would continue to pay dividends for years to come. As the meeting adjourned and people lingered to chat, I couldn't help but smile. We had taken on the homeowner association and won, but more importantly, we had won back our sense of community. And that was worth more than any lawsuit could ever provide. Update. 10 years had passed since our landmark lawsuit against the old homeowner association. Our neighborhood had become a shining example of what a community could achieve when people worked together. But we were about to face a new challenge that would test everything we'd built. It started with a letter from the city. They were planning a major highway expansion that would cut right through the edge of our neighborhood, potentially forcing several families to relocate. The project threatened to undo much of the progress we'd made over the past decade. When I shared the news at our next neighborhood association meeting, the room erupted in concerned chatter. "They can't do this," Sarah exclaimed. "We've put so much work into building this community." Tom, our retired lawyer friend, raised his hand. "Actually, they can. It's called eminent domain, but that doesn't mean we can't fight it." I nodded, feeling a familiar determination rising within me. "Tom's right. We've faced tough challenges before, and we've come out stronger. We can do it again." We quickly formed a committee to address the highway issue. Our first step was to gather more information. We invited city planners to present their proposal and answer questions from the community. It became clear that while the city had considered alternative routes, they viewed our neighborhood as the path of least resistance. "They think we'll be an easy target," I told Sarah, after one particularly frustrating meeting with city officials. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." We decided to fight the proposal on multiple fronts. Tom helped us navigate the legal aspects, looking for any procedural errors in the city's plans. Meanwhile, we mobilized a grassroots campaign to raise awareness about the impact the highway would have on our community. We organized peaceful protests at City Hall, created a social media campaign that went viral locally, and even produced a short documentary showcasing the strong sense of community we'd built. Our efforts caught the attention of local media, and soon our story was making headlines. One evening, as I was putting up Save Our Neighborhood signs with my teenage son Jake, he asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Dad, do you really think we can win this? The city seems pretty set on their plans." I paused, considering how to respond. "Honestly, Jake, I don't know if we'll win, but I do know that standing up for what's right is always worth it. And whatever happens, we'll face it together as a community." As our campaign gained momentum, we encountered some pushback. A few residents, tempted by the city's buyout offers, considered selling their homes. Others worried that fighting the city would only delay the inevitable and cost us more in the long run. During one tense community meeting, a resident named Mark stood up, his face red with anger. "This is pointless. We're just wasting time and money fighting City Hall. We should take their offers and move on." The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond. I took a deep breath and stood up. "Mark, I understand your frustration. This isn't an easy situation for any of us. But let me ask you something. When you think about our neighborhood, what comes to mind? Is it just the houses and the streets? Or is it the people, the relationships, the sense of belonging we've built here?" I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of my neighbors. 10 years ago, we took on a powerful homeowner association that was trying to bully us. We won that fight not because we had more money or influence, but because we stood together. This highway might seem like a bigger opponent, but the principle is the same. We are stronger together than we are apart. My words seemed to resonate. Even Mark nodded grudgingly. We left that meeting with renewed determination. Our efforts began to pay off. City council members, feeling the pressure from our campaign, started to waver in their support for the highway plan. We presented alternative routes that would spare our neighborhood while still achieving the city's traffic flow goals. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jake, my son, had been working on a school project about urban planning. He'd created a computer model that showed how improving public transportation and implementing smart traffic systems could alleviate congestion without building the new highway. When he showed me his project, I was amazed. "Jake, this is incredible. Do you think you could present this to the city planners?" He looked nervous but nodded. "I guess so." "Do you really think they'd listen to a kid?" "They'll listen to a good idea," I assured him. "And this is a great one." We arranged a meeting with the city planning department. Jake was understandably nervous, but he delivered his presentation with confidence. The planners were impressed, asking questions and taking notes. A week later, we received news that the city was putting the highway project on hold to explore alternative solutions, including some based on Jake's ideas. It wasn't a definitive victory, but it was a significant step in the right direction. As word spread through the neighborhood, there was a sense of cautious optimism. We'd bought ourselves time and a seat at the table in planning our community's future. To celebrate this milestone and reinforce our community bonds, we decided to hold a big neighborhood festival. Everyone pitched in, setting up food stands, organizing games, and preparing performances. The day of the festival dawned bright and clear. As I helped set up chairs in the park, I saw families streaming in, laughing and chatting. The sense of unity was palpable. Mid-afternoon, as the festival was in full swing, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Lisa, the homeowner association president from the neighboring town, who had visited years ago seeking advice. "Mike," she called out, waving as she approached. "I hope you don't mind me crashing your party. I heard about your fight with the city and wanted to see how you were doing." I grinned, shaking her hand. "Not at all. It's great to see you. How are things in your neighborhood?" Lisa beamed. "Wonderful, actually. We took your advice to heart. It wasn't easy, but we've really turned things around. In fact, we've been supporting your campaign against the highway. It would affect us too, you know." As we chatted, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Jake, looking excited. "Dad, the city planner is here. She wants to talk to us." Sure enough, Janet Lee, the head of the city planning department, was making her way through the crowd towards us. My heart raced, wondering what news she might bring. "Mr. Thompson," she said, shaking my hand. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I have some news I wanted to deliver in person." I introduced her to Lisa and Jake, then held my breath as Janet continued. "After much consideration and thanks to the alternatives your community proposed, especially young Jake here, the city has decided to permanently shelve the highway expansion plan." The words took a moment to sink in. When they did, I felt a wave of relief and joy wash over me. "Instead," Janet went on, "we'd like to work with your neighborhood association on implementing some of the smart traffic solutions and public transportation improvements you suggested. We think they could be a model for the entire city." As the news spread through the festival, cheers erupted. Neighbors hugged each other, some wiping away tears of joy. We had done it again, faced a seemingly insurmountable challenge and come out on top. That evening, as the festival wound down and the sun set, I found myself back in the park, the same spot where this all began years ago with a contentious homeowner association notice. Sarah joined me, a smile on her face. "Who would have thought that one lawsuit could lead to all this?" she mused. I chuckled. "Certainly not me. But you know what? I wouldn't change a thing." As we looked out over our neighborhood, the renovated parks, the thriving community gardens, the families and friends celebrating together, I felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. We had turned $1 million lawsuit into a priceless community. We'd faced down corporations, governments, and our own doubts, emerging stronger each time. Whatever challenges the future might hold, I knew that together we could handle anything. The lawsuit had been the spark, but it was the spirit of our community that had truly transformed our neighborhood. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. And guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed this epic neighbor showdown, please smash that like button, comment with some house emojis to show your support, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks a lot, and I will see you again tomorrow with another amazing story.